if you have long hair, you got to learn the timing of it.
Yeah, your hair has a timing.
It does. It really does. That sounds like a joke, but
it's not. See, look, right here. Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We're here to help train your eye so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. Cassie has about 22 years and I have about 24. Tonight, we are talking about a topic that is one of my personal pet peeves. We're talking about musicality, and we're actually doing a mini series on it for this week and I think the next 2 weeks afterwards. Tonight, we're talking about organic and lyrical musicality, and that is how I call it, like organic. And it's basically just not doing a ton of patterns that have nothing to do with the music.
Yeah. AKA not forced musicality.
Yes.
It's like, here, I'm really good at this move. It totally fits with this song. Fingers crossed behind your back.
Exactly. So we're talking about organic musicality. Now we're going to be looking at one of the videos that I think is probably one of the first videos that a lot of people come across, because if you go on YouTube and you search West Coast Swing, it is the first one that comes up. And it is Ben Morris and Tessa Cunningham. Munroe now, but back then it was just Tessa Cunningham.
I'm dropping the link in the chat. Go ahead and give it a watch, and when you're done, we will get to analyzing. Would you like to talk about some stuff before we to the screen share?
I would. Okay, so like I said, musicality can be one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to West Coast specifically. And I think it's because I have a lot of various forms of training when it comes to music. I have dance and, singing and instrumental training. So it's one of my biggest pet peeves. Now, I think the thing for me, now the way that I see dance is that it's kind of the final piece of like the full art piece. So I kind of think of like all of the music and whatnot, the lyrics as being more of like the building blocks. And with dance, it's more of that final piece. It's the visual representation of that whole thing, of the whole like song, all of it together. So all of the different layers of the instruments and lyrics and whatnot. And I think that that's why it bothers me when people don't acknowledge what's happening in the music, because it no longer looks like the song, right? There's a lot of dances that they tend to be, high level dances that you watch it and you see the song, right? And in a lot of lower levels, it's not so much that way. Like there are some pieces that, people will acknowledge, like, fast footwork pieces or whatever, but it's not like you don't see the full song being played out for you. And that to me is like the most important piece of it. Like if you don't have that, it's hard to connect to the music as well. Like just you when you're dancing and you're listening to it, it's harder to connect if you aren't like working with it and trying to be a visual representation of what's happening. So there are some key points to keeping good musicality, keeping it more organic. So I think the first thing is really following the speed and the energy of the music. And what that means is we don't start out full speed. There's generally a gradual build of some sort in terms of energy. And speed-wise, usually at the beginning of songs, you want to either keep it, more like working just beat by beat rather than having a bunch of different things going on, or you want to like even half time that. So you have, 2 beats for a movement and then 2 beats for another. So you really want to keep things slow at the beginning of things. And then as you gradually get towards, like a chorus, that's going to be generally when you have a higher energy and if there is a full song that you're dancing to, generally, like the highest energy is going to be towards the very end of it, but not necessarily at the very end, but more towards the end of it. So generally, it's like if you were to, like, there's a visual of it. It's kind of like a mountain, right? Where you have like a peak and then it drops back down again. Generally, there's not like, it doesn't end at the peak usually. Obviously, people break rules, but generally that's not how it works. So that's the first thing. Next thing is to really think of the details. Like, the details are what make or break the musicality for me. And a lot of times, what you'll see is acknowledgement of a piece of music in a large way, right? So let's say that there's like an extended piece of, like word or phrase or something like that, where it all kind of drags out. A lot of times you'll see maybe like a huge split or something like that, from the follow, something that's big and, really visual. But I think that what makes a piece of musicality come together is when it's really incorporated into what's already happening, right? So rather than saying like, okay, I hear this, I'm just going to do like this big thing, saying like, okay, I hear this like extended piece, I'm actually just going to change the way and the timing that I'm moving through this next movement, whatever pattern, whatever it is, changing the timing of things. I think that's super important. And really, if you watch like the highest levels, you will see constant syncopation of movements, right? So what I mean by that is it's not just like straight counts. So if you are doing just like a left side pass, right? So generally that's just straight counts. So you go, 1, 2, 3, and whatever. But if you watch that at a higher level with musicality added, it's not just going to be step on 1, step on 2, step on 3, and it's going to be like 1, like it drags itself out a little bit to match the words or to match whatever is happening in the music. And that is something that is a really small detail, but it doesn't always happen, especially at lower levels. And I think along with that, the other important thing is to make sure that you have room to breathe, not rushing, not constantly trying to be doing something, right? The idea behind us all dancing is, we want to have fun. That's why we're all here. We want to have fun, right? So if you are rushing, you're trying to be like, oh, look at all these things I can do, it takes the fun out of things generally, for not only yourself but also your partner. Right? You want to just enjoy the music, enjoy the time, rather than panicking and being like, oh, I have to do all these things. So in the video that we're watching today, there is quite a few places that they have some good like breath, where they're really not rushing through anything. They do take the time. They don't complete the pattern necessarily right away. And that's kind of another thing, is like, though you will see some recognizable patterns and whatnot in higher levels, generally what you actually end up seeing is like the start of a pattern, and then it ends a different way because of what the music is saying. Or, you have a pattern, but then it's interrupted in the middle bit, like because there's a break in the music or something different happens in the music and they want to acknowledge that, right? So even though you will see patterns that are recognizable, like basic patterns, it isn't the exact same thing, right? It's not the same pattern that you learned when you first were learning the pattern, right? It's going to be a little bit different. So those are kind of the main things to really keep in mind, the keys. And the last thing that I want to mention kind of before we get into things is that there's a lot of different layers to music, and in general, you want to keep to like the top of the music. So like what is most recognizable to the ear. Like if you were to hum the music or sing it, like it's what you would hum or what you would sing, like that part is what you want to focus on usually. Now I will say that there's a lot of times where you can and should acknowledge different layers in the music, but a lot of times I try to keep to the top layer of it because it is it's less rushed that way. A lot of times what you'll see is, okay, you're doing this movement and then there's like a really fast little piece of the music that you hear that's on a different layer, right? It's not the main thing that you're hearing. And you'll see somebody try and fit that in. Like they'll try and just like do something really fast with the beat or whatever. And it becomes jumbled. Like it doesn't quite fit well within what you're already doing. And I think that a lot of times there's good opportunities to, acknowledge something different in the music, not necessarily in the middle of something else. I think that really good times usually are like when you're at the end of the slot or, you're stopped, something like that. Otherwise, it becomes too much, and we want to try and keep things simple. I think a lot of people forget that, like the main thing, like keep it simple. It's going to be more enjoyable that way. Like you don't have to acknowledge everything. You don't have to rush everything. So that is my TED Talk. Thanks for coming.
Oh, that was beautiful. Can I add some TED Talk to your TED Talk?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. I want to bring back my chef metaphor, the idea that a dancer is a chef, not a cook, because cooks just follow a recipe. You can't stray from the recipe because you just don't have the skills yet. But just because a chef has access to an entire pantry and refrigerator's worth of ingredients doesn't mean you're going to throw all of them into one dish. Bad things happen when you do that. Cut to scene from Ratatouille where Linguini is just like, he realized he made a mistake and he throws in all this stuff. And Remy's like, what have you done? Anyways, but if we think of that kind of like which layers of the music you pay the most attention to, let's take a really basic recipe like fettuccine Alfredo. Fettuccine Alfredo is pasta, Parmigiano Reggiano, butter, salt, maybe a little pepper. That's it. To maintain the integrity of the dish, the priority needs to be the pasta and the cheese, right? If you were to suddenly make the priority of that dish the butter, it would no longer be fettuccine Alfredo. If you made the dominant ingredient salt, so that's another way of thinking about like when you stay to the most recognizable layers of the music as your baseline that you're always returning to in your dancing, that's how you're maintaining the integrity of the song with your musicality. And then when you were talking about the peak and resolve thing, if you haven't watched our storytelling episode from last week, storytelling also follows that same kind of motion. And lastly, visualizing music is something that doesn't necessarily get taught a lot, and that's what we do inside of our Patreon for our nerdy students. So we have a fan tier, so if you just really love our free episodes, $5 a month. But if you want to get even nerdier with us, we actually do hand animated analyses of music every month, so you can visually see the different layers of a song. It's really cool. We are nerds. Anyways. All right, shall we?
Yep.
To the screen share.
Like I was saying, right, we have our intro here. And when I say intro, I mean the like first 4/8 counts. So what we're seeing during this time, I will say a lot of times at lower levels, you will see them start out and just start going right into open, right into patterns. What we see here is they're actually in like a closed position for 3 full 8 counts. And then the last 8 count of the 4, they go into an opened position. However, they don't rush right into it. They do a little bit more in between. And you'll notice that we don't see any triples starting out. That is one of my biggest pet peeves is when you have a medium to fast song and you start out immediately with triples, the energy is already too high. Generally, especially if there is many triples. Sometimes if there is one or two, that's fine. And I say that because you'll see right here, Tessa actually does a little bit of a triple to style, right? So the lyrics are, "Hey, pretty baby with the high heels on," right? So because she is basically more in an anchored position, so on her left side, she has to switch her weight a little bit in order to do the little flick of the foot that she does, right? So we have a triple, kind of, right? That's not exactly an anchor, but we see kind of 3 different steps there. But it's not really, yeah, it's loose. It's kind of, the vague idea of a triple of some sort.
Right, but you can still see her hip swing. And that's part of what is like an inherent part of a triple step in West Coast swing. So that's how you can have a triple rhythm without triple weight transfers.
Yeah. Aaron said, so always start with the triples for fast songs.
I would disagree with that. Yeah, it depends on the song. This is something we talked about at length in our analyzing first place from novice to champs episode. The idea that you really want to say, "Hi, how are you? My name's so-and-so," as opposed to jumping to second base when you're dancing to a song, because you need to get on the same page as a partnership with the music. And only after that can you start bringing in the audience. And so many people cut past engaging with their partner in the music first, and they go straight to engaging the audience. And that creates a whole mess of problems. And one of the easiest ways to solve that issue is by taking it super slow, regardless of what song you have when you start out.
Yeah. Basically just paring down your, like, really stripping down the movement that you're doing and not adding in all of the things. So rather than, like, if you get into like an anchored position at the beginning of the song, rather than doing a triple, taking 2 steps.
Yeah, or doing a tap step. A simple tap step can acknowledge a triple rhythm, but without actually having the energy of a triple step.
Yeah. So, talking about those triples. Okay, so we saw Tessa do the little, like, very loose triple with the little styling. And then the really, like, the focus here is on the weight changes. So you can see, like, they're really shifting back and forth for quite a while. And then they take this time, this footwork that Tessa does, to have a moment to breathe, right? So even after she plants that foot, they're not immediately going anywhere. Ben is standing up, but, like, we're not immediately going anywhere in terms of, like, down the slot, side to side. We're just staying in place, right? And that really lets things rest, gives everyone like a breath. And I will say, as an audience member even, it is nice to have a breath. It's not just, you as a dancer should, take time to chill. Like, as an audience member, personally, I get overwhelmed when there's way too much happening and there's no change.
Yeah, it's really important to let your moments breathe so the audience can take them in and acknowledge them. If you breeze past a cool moment, it's really jarring and it actually takes away from the moment.
Yes, and this next part is actually the perfect example of that. So we have this last 8 count. We're going into a more opened position. However, we have some stylized movement. I don't know what Ben is doing.
It's
a walk
the double
of some
chin
sort.
shimmy.
Tessa's doing a little bit of, like, ronde, like sweeps back as she's moving. But so right here, right, so we have this 8 count where they're moving back. Now, usually what you see is either on the 6 or the 8 of pattern, you are anchoring, getting ready to go. That's not what happens here. So what actually happens here is they take this full 8 count, right, to get into this open position. So at the end here, this is like 6, 7, 8-ish. We actually don't go into the next start of the pattern, right? So this right here, the settling and getting ready is 1, 2 of the next 8 count. And they don't move, Tessa doesn't move forward until the 3. And so that is the perfect example of really letting things breathe, not rushing into the next thing, right? Even though, you know, you are trained to want to go forward on the 1 or to, you know, start going back on the and of 6 for the 1. They're not doing that here because musically, that's not what is actually happening. Like there's a musical piece that they're doing, and then they're letting you have a moment to soak it in before they're going into the next thing. So now we're going into something that is a little bit more recognizable pattern-wise, which I will say I appreciate the way that they do it because it's going into like a shadow position. But if you see, Ben doesn't actually have both hands of hers. She has a free hand. He actually goes on her back, right? So we have this hand right here. Instead of holding it, he drops it, and she now has a free hand. So she uses that to emphasize what the lyric is here, which is loveliness. So the lyric says loveliness, but it's like a dragged out, like loveliness. Like it's not just, you know, a succinct word. So she actually uses that arm that she has free, and she creates that drag of the word with the drag of the arm. And the other thing that she does is she actually has a level change here, right? So she goes up onto the toe as she comes with that arm.
And she also, what I love is she doesn't come down out of that at the same time. Mm-hmm. So her feet come down while her hand is actually continuing to move up. Mm-hmm. And it's really subtle, but that creates just a little bit of overlap, blending the two positions together. Love it.
Yep. So I will say that is the first like section that we see of this where they're really taking what is a very recognizable pattern, going into that shadow position and coming right back out of it and changing it, right? So like I said earlier, we're seeing the beginning of a pattern that's recognizable, but then they're doing something different out of it. And they're actually changing the timing of what they're doing in that pattern, right? So the first like 3 counts of it, I would say maybe, are the exact same thing that you would normally do just if you were doing it, you know, in a like basic pattern sense. But then we have this timing adjustment, right? So you don't see Tessa come in and out of that. It's not a 1, 2, right? She has that drag through. And that is exactly what really emphasizes the word and really shows the music.
And just because I'm a stickler for this, note how Ben's hand is on her ribs, not her waist.
Yeah.
Very important.
And his hand is there early also.
Yes. At some point we need to talk about the timing of Tessa's hair. Because I don't like, as someone with a lot of hair, for me to get my hair to hairography at the right moment requires being way ahead of the music. But her hair, especially in this video, is just the perfect like weight.
Yeah.
That it'll just hit things right on time. And I'm jealous.
Yeah. If you have long hair, you got to learn the timing of it.
Yeah, your hair has a timing.
It does. It really does. That sounds like a joke, but it's not.
See, look right here. Like, she knows just when to snap her head to look at Ben to make her hair follow through at the right time. So her hair is also in time with the music.
Yep.
So, you, Tessa. No, I'm joking.
Talking about this actual movement here. So this is the first part that we see that is accelerated. So we have this dip, which is weirdly supported. It looks a little weird based on how they're going into it, but
yeah,
it doesn't matter. The point is that we, in general, want to accelerate part of like when you're going into a dip like this, right? So generally it's this, like for follows, this underneath and up that needs to be a little bit accelerated. It needs to be like a whipping action to it. So we have this because we're wanting to match, it says walk your talk your dress, and dress is really emphasized in the music. And she actually does a really good job of emphasizing it in two different ways. So she uses the hand on the way down, and then there's actually like a breath almost on the way up that she acknowledges with like the foot. Right, so we have this hand flick on the way down, and then the foot comes in and kicks on the way up. And both of those emphasize a different part of that word. Going down, she's emphasizing like the actual hit of the word. And on the way up, she's emphasizing the release of the word, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit, because this is applicable to kind of like this entire video. And it's the idea of the more advanced you become as a West Coast swing dancer, the smaller increments of music are your puzzle pieces. So when you're first beginning, you think of your puzzle pieces as entire patterns, a whole 6-count pass or a whole 8-count whip. But the more advanced you get, the closer you get down to 1 and 2 count puzzle pieces. Usually 2 count is how my brain works particularly. And this is something that actually Tessa and Miles teach quite often in workshops, is the idea of a tree. So if we take this 1, 2 of this pattern, and then they get into this position, like this could have been the entrance to a whip, but because of the way Ben has changed how his hand is interacting with her back, it's already changing the pattern. But if you ignore his right hand, this looks like the beginning of a whip, right? And then similarly, he modifies it the 2 counts here to turn her right here, even though he'd already planned on making it a weight supported move. That's besides the point of my point right now. If he hadn't already been taking her off her axis, he could have led an arm catch and release and had her spin in place, for example, from a very, very, very similar position to what they're in right now. So this is something that tends to be a little bit more important for leaders to master. Is thinking in these 2 count increments, because that allows you to be organic in your patterning. with your follow, but it also allows you to react to a follow who has changed the game in some way, shape, or form. Because if a follow does something really awesome, you want to use that and not cut it off and just supersede your idea over theirs. And by thinking about, oh, this position, I'm like on count 10 of this weird abstract pattern, but this count 10 looks like count 2 of this other pattern I know really well. And that's how you're able to start creating compound sentences in West Coast swing instead of just short, simple sentences like C spot run. So yeah, I think I had another thing to say, but it fell out of my head. So I'm going to proceed forward.
I do want to add in follows. If you don't have support on your back and you're going into a dip like that, don't go all the way down.
Agreed.
Unless you're prepared to support yourself.
Yeah. I think there were a couple of things contributing to this, because first of all, there's so much rotational momentum that's hard to circumvent. And I know Tessa is really strong. Like, she's alarmingly strong. All of the champion women in West Coast swing are alarmingly strong.
Yeah.
But her left arm is so rigid. I'm not sure Ben was quite prepared for her arm to be that strong. So I think she levers around the pivot point of her arm colliding with his thigh.
Yeah.
I think that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Walk it off like nothing happened.
Aaron said, where does the support on that move even happen for a lead?
All right. Find the correct moment. So usually what you want to aim for is the front side of your forearm across the follow's upper back. And so right now you can see how her back is not facing him. And that's why this gets a little wonky. We talked about a similar position with Hugo and Khalees a couple of weeks ago. You want to create stability across the follow's upper back with your forearm as a leader, as opposed to putting the locus of the connection on the follow's shoulder joint. Some follows can handle that, like Tessa and Khalees, for example, because of how strong they are, but you don't want to depend on a follow being that strong, because you can put a tremendous amount of strain on a follow's shoulder doing that. Instead, you want to have like a shelf, like you're a butler and you're ready to take someone's coat across your forearm. That's like the position you want. And then you want your forearm across their upper back and your hand is kind of braced around their upper arm. So your wrist is kind of in their armpit.
Yep.
How am I doing with the description tonight?
It's great.
Cool. Very graphic, apparently.
Yep.
I hope that answered your question, Erin.
Last thing I want to add for follows, if you are getting into this position here, what I would suggest is, rather than trying to awkwardly stop or not go into it, I would suggest, rather than kicking that one leg out, keep both feet underneath you and just kind of squat into it.
Yeah.
And I would also say, don't have your feet at the same like level underneath you. Have one in front of the other a little bit.
Yeah, like if she would have brought this foot maybe here instead, she would have been a lot more stable.
Yeah. Yep. Aaron said, okay, because I was wondering how they made that work. It looked like an armbar almost. Just learning that, the quad strength.
Yes.
So we have our next musical piece right here, and it's something that Ben is leading. So the lyrics are miles around, and he brings her up and brings her into a rotation moment, which is clever. So this rotation here happens on miles around. So we're taking her around. which is clever. And that's the kind of musicality I like seeing from leads, is like something that flows really well and is clever. It doesn't need to be quite as detailed as follows.
And I want to highlight how he is leading a rock and go anchor out of this pattern in order to hit that on time. So basically, functionally, what a rock and go does is it's taking the last two counts of the previous pattern and functionally making them work like the first two counts of the next pattern. So instead of period, space, capital letter, two sentences, we have comma, space, next clause in the sentence. And that's what a rock and go does.
Andrew said, I feel like Ben is the king of clever. Yeah.
Yes. He is the punniest. And I love it because it's not like, it's not cheesy.
Yeah, exactly.
Like sometimes he'll go cheesy on purpose, which I also love, but most of the time he is usually so clever with acknowledging the actual words in the lyrics, not just rhythmically, but what the words mean in a way that is swing content.
Yep, that's great. So I want to look at this dip for a second. So we come out of this turn for Tessa, and so the words miles around kind of are very soft, and then the next part of the music is rather soft. So we don't have any like sharp hits necessarily or anything. So the way that he is leading this dip, there is not really any acceleration to it. It's just kind of a follow through and redirect out of this catch from the rotation.
He's also catching her head.
Yeah.
Not only as support, but that might be a musical intention to be like, hey, don't snap your head right here. That would be a little too much for this part of the song.
Yeah.
As someone with a sad neck, head support in a dip is like,
yeah,
so delicious.
So right here, lyrics are paint the town. So the way that the lyrics are, there is a change in pitch. So what you can see is Tessa actually, the way that I tend to think of it is I equate pitch of the music. So like how high is the note, how low is the note, with the level of your body. So if there's a change in pitch, I usually like to see a change in the body in the same manner. So if the pitch is lower, then I like seeing a bend in the knees, or, you know, something that's lower to the ground. If the pitch goes higher, then I like to see something upward. And that's exactly what Tessa does here. So paint the town, paint and town are higher than the. So she actually emphasizes that. So she has this up right here. This is paint. Then we go down for the, and we come back up for 10.
And something really sneaky is her up emphasis on paint relative to where she was before. Like she'll go down a little bit right here to make that paint really pop, but it's the fact that when the lyric the comes in, that they both go way down, that makes that initial level change in retrospect appear a little larger.
Yeah, if you are already upright and you do a level change up, it's definitely going to help to emphasize the down on the next part. It makes it look more drastic if you need that. Yeah, so I love the choices. She's not doing anything that disrupts what she's being led into. She's just changing the level to acknowledge the music. It doesn't change anything between their partnership. So this next move right here, I will say, so Ben leads a clever musicality piece. However, it's not exactly syncopated. Erin said, gotta go, need to get ready for things. See you soon. See you later, Erin.
See ya.
So we have Ben leading, the lyrics are Kiss Me Baby. So he's leading her into this fake kiss thing, which is clever and musical. However, it's not necessarily syncopated to the music, right? So he's not moving as the words are happening. But what does happen is that Tessa acknowledges it, and she does syncopate her leg to the music. So even though we don't have necessarily too much syncopation right here, like right even up to here, there's not too much syncopation. It's just more acknowledging the lyrics. That leg that Tessa does acknowledges that syncopation and acknowledges one specific word, I believe, in the music.
And it calls back to the beginning of the song because she did that at the very beginning.
Yep. I think the lyrics are "Tell Me Twice," and I believe her leg goes up on twice. Yes. And it is like the exact timing of it. So it goes up twice and it's down at the very end of it. So this footwork right here, it's just very simple pass, but her footwork actually syncopates as well, coming into this side to side right here, hip catch. So right here, this double step, it is syncopated with "You're the one." So she's taking 2 steps on the one. And while it is what she is supposed to be doing basically for, you know, that pattern, that send out that she's doing, she does it in a manner that is very well syncopated. It's not straight time for it.
Yeah, and it's clearly purposeful. And that's something that when you're in lower competitive divisions can be a struggle because a judge only has 7 seconds to look at you, right? So if you do something that is outside of the standard straight timing of West Coast swing, you have to make sure it looks very purposeful so they don't think that that's your basic and your basic is incorrect. Just something to keep in mind as you're trying to incorporate this kind of musicality into your dancing. Yep.
So going into this next part, we have our side-to-side redirect, which is basically hip catches. It's going into the chorus of it. So it's "The Way You Make Me Feel." And the word "feel" is extended. And the way that we are changing this particular movement to like match the words of the song. So even though Ben is redirecting her, she's actually smoothing it out some, because that section of the lyrics is pretty smooth. Like it's not like sharp. It's not like "The way you make me feel," you know, it's very smooth. And the sharpness is staccato. That's what it's called. And it's very opposite of that. So rather than her doing what you might normally see, which would be like a step together almost, and it's a rather sharp redirect, she kind of sways it more and just connects it, makes it smoother. And then she acknowledges the last word "feel," and she does like a nice hip swing with it. And the way that she drops down and adds in that hip swing adds in the extra timing that she needs for extending for that word, because she's not really doing anything different than she was doing the previous few redirects, but she's just taking it down, having more to move, right? So she's dropping and then straightening, and the that together lengthens that movement. So she's making it fit that word.
And then I want to add one thing that's kind of common that is really helpful as your baseline in these kind of hip catch back and forth pattern as a follow is to make sure you're committing your full weight to each foot. Because socially, especially when you're with a leader who you don't dance with all the time, it's really helpful information. A leader can move a follow who is continuing to transfer their weight completely from foot to foot. So while I always teach that personally as like a baseline, in this instance, Tessa is not 100% changing her weight from foot to foot. You can see she's staying more centered between her 2 feet and she has a wider stance. And what that's doing is it's giving her more control over this moment, like Alicia was talking about how Tessa is smoothing out this musicality right here. And one of the ways she's doing that is by taking more control of the moment by not fully committing her weight to one foot or the other. Because if she did, Ben would then have more ability to change what she's doing. My cat keeps aggressively like uncurling and then recurling up next to me. It's so cute. It's really distracting.
So we have this next movement, which I love the styling for this. It's fantastic. And it doesn't change anything that Ben's leading either. So basically what's happening here, so the words are turn me on, and it's basically the same pitch for those 3 words, and they're kind of strung together. So what she's doing is she is creating a lengthier movement with this rotation here, right? Rather than just stepping and turning. And then because the phrase isn't actually finished yet, she continues the movement, right? So she places the foot, but she doesn't actually stop. It's not like a solid plant and then you start moving again. She continues that movement. And so she's rotating right here, okay? And then rather than stopping and rotating the other way, she continues to go to the right and then lets it flow through back to the left. And the way that she's doing that is by where she's placing the foot and allowing herself to rotate past Ben a little bit.
Yeah, the way she's initiating the momentum for these turns is with a forward, a ronde that goes forward first and then out to the side. So you can see her right foot comes forward towards Ben. It swings around out to the side. And then when she hits her line, she lets the tension across the right plane of her body stay there. And then the momentum of her foot continues the turn. And then she basically does the same thing here, except she initiates the ronde sideways first. And then like I was talking about, thinking in like 1 or 2 beat increments, like, oh, this position looks like that position. Right here, they're both on the same page. It's like, oh, the phrase isn't quite over yet. This requires a little bit more resolution. And Ben's like, what does this look like? Oh, it looks like a hammerlock. Let's do a hammerlock. And that's one of the examples of how thinking in small increments and understanding positioning and what you can do in certain positions can be so helpful for organic musicality. And he was able to take what Tessa was doing and add to it in a meaningful musical way.
Yeah, and I also want to add that when Tessa does actually finish and plant the feet after this rotation, it is on a musical moment, but it's not like I've been talking about, you know, really acknowledging that top of the music, and it's not actually acknowledging that, but it is acknowledging the best thing, which there's like a musical piece that's like a da da or something like that, and that's happening as she's planting the foot. So she's planting the first foot on the first da, second on the second da, and it's very musical, and you can hear it if you listen to the music, but it's not that top layer, but it would be hard for her to finish on something that's like really on that top layer. And so she did the best thing possible and did it on time with the music. What bothers me is when people will like come out of something and it's not syncopated, right? So rather than her stepping on each of the da da, it would be at a separate time from those, right? So it, like the step might be before and then after those two. And it doesn't look as nice. It doesn't fit the song very well. And it's just little things like that that really make that visual of the music, like, what word am I looking for? Impactful. So going into this next part, so Ben is sitting and sliding. Now he has two movements for that. And her, so when Tessa's going under the arm, it's the words "you knock me." And so it's like I said previously, like those words are kind of connected. It's one smooth, like same pitch. And she is acknowledging that by keeping that under the arm very smooth. And then Ben is acknowledging the next part. So it says "you knock me" and it says "off my feet." Now, what he does is he kind of squats on feet and then slides on now. So it's very musical. Even though it's not happening at the exact moment that it's saying "you knock me off my feet," it's still acknowledging it, and it's acknowledging it in a way that fits with the music. And now I will say afterwards, it looks like he's kind of just pulling Tessa forward. And he is, but she basically does it in a way like she kind of waits a second almost, and she lets her arm go ever so slightly, because then she's taking steps that are in time with the music. So I believe the word is baby, but it's like, it sounds like two separate things, right? So it's you can hear the syllables of it. So she takes one step on bay, one step on B, and then there's the foot plant, right? So all of this is following the music. It's not just going, like she's not just letting him pull her at any time, right? She's letting him pull her, but she's doing it so it makes sense.
Yeah.
And this next piece, right? So
I want to add to this part just a little bit, because this is an excellent visual demonstration of tall follow short leader. And you can see how she's being pulled down, like she's being accelerated into that, and she's having to manage that acceleration because the hand is not only moving down the slot but toward the floor. And it's very obvious at speed that Tessa's energy is going down into the floor. And like Alicia was saying, the way she manages that is first by reeling out her rope. So not only does she extend her arm through the first moment or two to stay on time, but she rotates her body to give Ben a little bit more rope. And then she stays into her knees in order to dissipate that downward energy. So study this, tall follows. Learn. Study this, shorter leaders, and never do that to your follow unless you're Ben Morris in this moment, in which case it makes perfect sense. Yep. All right, as you were.
I was just saying that, so she takes us 2 steps forward on the word baby, and then She plants her foot to prep for this kick over the head on the next beat. And then as she kicks up over the head, right, it's kind of it's a connected piece of music, right? So that whole smooth swoop over, like that's a very connected movement, right? So that's what's acknowledging that piece of music that sounds really connected. And a lot of times I think that like the main thing when you hear like a connected piece of music, the pitch is going to be the same and it sounds very similar in the way that like the syllables are if it's lyrics, or it sounds very similar in the way that the rhythm is if it's instrumental. So I like dragging that out sometimes, and rather than acknowledging, you know, like 3 different pieces, because it sounds very dragged together, make it one long movement. So that's exactly what she does. And basically, so she does the kick over and whatnot. Like the prep for it is very musical. And then we have our plant, kick, spin, anchor. It's going 1, 2, 3, 4, basically. So it's one thing happening on each beat. So it's staying pretty smooth throughout. Like there's not anything, like she's not extending one part more than the other. It's pretty smooth throughout that. And then I believe we're coming into another dip here shortly.
Yeah, that sounds right. Is there any particular technique to fall on your butt without bruising your tailbone?
He reaches down with his hand first.
Gotcha.
And he softens it. So if you are dropping down from any high level, basically you want to try and gradually place body parts on the ground. Right. So he's doing that by placing the hand first and then softening the rest of the body onto the ground. But yeah.
Cool. Makes sense.
Anytime you're going from high to low, try to gradually put body pieces on the ground. Don't just all at once, because it will do exactly like that sounded.
Yeah. And when I was like doing all my solo dancing, I couldn't do those movements because my knees were already busted from my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So like I only did gymnastics for 1 year because it became very clear, oh, she should not do those things. And similarly, certain dance moves, I'm like, I see other people doing them. I'm not going to participate. So I'm going to live vicariously through you.
Yeah, this is a slightly separate story, but there was one time I was on dance team and we were doing like a show routine that has like props and whatnot. It was a Michael Jackson song. And basically we had to fall forward onto our faces, and you were just basically standing and you planked forward.
Nope.
That was it. And it was one of the hardest things to do. It took everyone so long to kind of get the hang of it, because it's really hard when you're just falling as one piece to gradually put things on the ground. And so you really gotta gradually go in with that hand and try and stop yourself. But anyways,
I emotionally disagree with that situation.
Yeah. It was hard to get over mentally to just just fall straight forward, like you didn't have your hands forward, nothing.
Yeah, just, fake your own death.
Pretty much, yeah. Okay. Anyways, sorry. Sidebar for that story, but it was relevant based on what we're talking about. So we have another dip here, and this one, so we had that first one that was the exact same thing. He, however, held her head for that first one, and it was rather smooth. This one, the guitar on it is like a very staccato note, right? So he leads her into it in a little bit more of an accelerated movement, right? So that hand toss over the head accelerates the movement a little bit. But then also right here, there's some acceleration on the down and then on the up. And that is what makes it more staccato, and it's sharper than the previous one. And I will say that the head release on this one does help. If he were to hold her head on this one, it would not look quite as dramatic because of the way that he's dipping her. It's like that full layout, right? So you need to have the end of that head, especially when it's like a dramatic thing.
Yep. I want to highlight a couple of things that Ben's doing to really emphasize the impact of this. So first thing is his left foot. He lifts it up and then he grounds down into it. And that gives extra contrast between before and then during the dip. And then the other thing he's doing is doing some really lovely shaping with his left arm and elbow as he's inviting her to connect with his upper back by shaping up into his left. That also creates a lot more contrast because this is the silhouette of the shape on this frame. And then this is the silhouette on this frame. And those two are drastically different. It's kind of like what we were talking about with Khalees in Hugo when she was doing her chest pops. She would collapse her chest a little bit first before doing a pop, and it just makes it more powerful because there was contrast between those two positions.
Yeah. So we're getting into the next verse, and you can see here. So that sharp dip was the end of the previous phrase. Now this new phrase, because we are getting out of the chorus and back into a verse, basically we're slowing it down again. And the way that we're taking that energy down, there's a couple things that happen, right? So the first thing is that we are slowing that movement down into two counts for those first two sways, and then we're going 5, 6, 7, 8 for the next four, right? So 5, 6, 7, 8, and so those in particular really drop it down and slowly bring it back up in terms of energy and in terms of speed of movement. And the other thing that happens is we are kind of just dropping down a little bit, right? So having that drop and the what do I want to call it? Like the prep to the drop, it adds that extra time. And so it really smooths it out, but also gives it some extra timing in order to really drop down the energy.
Yeah, it's like a hover moment, just a breath in.
Yep. And I would say that like this right here that they're doing, especially the first two steps of it, where each is 2 counts, it really, even though it's not like a stop to give, like a breath, because of how much it slows down and the drastic contrast from that dip, it really gives everyone a moment to breathe, even though they're not like stopped moving. They haven't stopped moving. They're still moving. But because they take that energy down so much, it really mimics that breath that comes from kind of pausing for a moment almost.
So we're already over the hour mark. So how would you like to spend the next 5 or so minutes so we can start wrapping up?
So this is like the very last verse of this particular song. The second song comes like in very shortly. So I was just going to wrap up by talking about the last couple things and then talking about the differences.
Sweet.
So, so right here we have 9 to 5 is the lyrics, and she emphasizes 5 with a swing of this leg here. And then she plants on the next beat. And that is like an audible beat. So she doesn't quite drag it out and make it soft, but because there's an audible beat that she places the foot down on, it's fine.
She's softening it a little bit by not letting Ben continue rotating her with her frame.
Mm-hmm.
She relaxes her frame a little bit for it to go behind her and then shapes into it. Musical disengagement. That's what we'll call that.
Yeah, I should say that what I mean by it's not soft is that she doesn't like fade out of it. There's an end to it, like a clear end to it.
Gotcha.
If it was really soft the whole time, she would probably place, but as a continuation of movement rather than like a separate thing. And then the next part is the lyrics by my side. And again, very clever of Ben, because he brings her around and to his side.
And then hand motion. See, I did the thing. She is by my side.
Yep.
Do you get it? Do you get it?
And this is another really good example of he is like showing the big picture, but like what he's leading her into isn't syncopated with the music necessarily. But she takes care of that, because if you watch here, she drops the head and then comes up. And that is on the word my side words. There's 2 words there. So she drops on my, comes up on side. And that is something that is like super simple, super minimal, but it really emphasizes it well.
Yes.
And then this last thing that I wanted to look at right here is what Ben does as he brings her in for a one-footed turn. So right here, you'll see he does like a hop hop.
Oh yeah, he totally does. I hadn't noticed that before.
And it's that I would say is one of the few times where he does something that is very detailed musicality. It's really syncopated because he kicks on forever. So ever is when he does one foot, the next foot. And that's a really detailed piece of musicality for him. The majority of the time he's done a little bit, but it's mostly been large musicality pieces that really work with phrases of the song rather than specific words and how the words are broken down. So that is the end of the first song.
Yep. And props to the DJ for fading the songs into each other at this point.
Very well done.
It was very well done.
So our next song, we're not going to necessarily frame through the whole thing, just want to talk about it briefly. So our next song is like a medium to fast blues. You guys watched it, so you know. It's called Funky Mama or something like that, I think.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Anyways, but we don't have lyrics for this song. So there's a couple things to keep in mind. Now, even though there's not lyrics to this song, there is still an instrumental melody. And like I said, with the lyrics and, you know, that top layer of the music, it's what you would hum or what you would sing if you were, you know, by yourself doing that. The instruments have a melody that is the exact same thing that you would probably hum or whatever. It's the top layer of it. And the difference is that there's, it kind of switches between different instruments taking that top layer more so than a song with lyrics. But that being said, there's still that melody, but for blues in general, we tend to work with the beats more than with you know, the melody pieces. A lot of times what we do with blues is we work with the beats, and then for anything that's like, you know, like a fast footwork section, something like that, that's when we work with the melody. But, you know, the majority of the time, it's not quite as syncopated, but the base of the movement is syncopated, right? So the swung time, that's what's syncopated with the music.
I need to slow-mo through this section. Just like it's got ants in his pants, and I'm here for it. Like it's a 4-dimensional body roll, and it's great. Pretty
much.
And while that moment is like really funny, like it's great, it's also really functional. They're both getting a break right there, because this is a really fast song, and so it's an excellent, like, you don't have to use comedy to give yourselves breaks during fast songs or fast blues songs, but it is an option. I'm here for it.
It is. Though I will say, with songs that are instrumental, it does seem more out of place sometimes if you do something comedic, because there's not lyrics that like dictate anything funny. But the way he did it was perfectly fine. Even though there's not really lyrics in the song, just the way that he did it, because it flowed into a different movement, it was fine.
Yeah. And it was also on brand for him.
That too, yes. So yeah, all of this that we're seeing here is really just working with the beats. Like, they're not doing too much syncopated, except for right here. Tessa's little head thing is really syncopated with a run in the music. So I forget exactly what happens, but there is a piece of the music that goes from like a high pitch to a low pitch fairly quickly. So it's like a blah, blah, blah type thing. And so she does that with her body, right? So she starts with the head and kind of lets it drop down. But for the most part, like I said, we're not doing as many small pieces of musicality as we were with the first song. And part of that is because a lot of blues music does have a really strong beat to it. And so that's something that's really obvious, and that's what you want to work with, because it is really obvious.
All right. After Tessa's signature move seems like a good place to stop. How does that sound?
Yep, I was basically done anyways.
All right, cool. Are there any questions, comments, concerns, or bad jokes? Feel free to either unmute yourself or type them in the chat. Next week, we are talking about layered musicality. Is that correct? Do you want to give them a quick teaser of that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that basically we are looking at, actually, I think we're looking at Parker and Tori, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Basically, we're just looking at the different pieces of the music that they're working with in more detail, because we're kind of looking at that today, but it's a little bit more in detailed, and yeah, I feel like that's the main description.
More musicality. So if you like the way we talked about musicality, come back next week. So check out our Patreon, patreon.com/nerdywcs. We'll be back next week with another episode. The replay of this will be up this Sunday at noon Pacific, barring any sort of complications from my first COVID vaccine that I get tomorrow. Should be fine.
We will be continuing talking about musicality for the next couple weeks. And then I think the other thing is that we're having Miles back.
Yes, probably at the end of June.
Months. Yeah. It'll be fun.
Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, we will see you next week. The part in the first song where he like puts Tessa right next to him for the next to me line, right?
Yeah.
That reminds me, he once did a just like a pro exhibition with Victoria at an event to the song Stand By Me. But apparently Victoria hadn't gotten the memo. And so like Ben kept sarcastically having Victoria positioned next to him the whole lot for like, you know, that's Ben. But it wasn't until like 3/4 of the way through the dance that she figured out what was going on. And you could just see the light bulb go on over her head. It's so funny. If I ever find it, I will like put a card up above. Like, this is so funny. Anyways.
That's great. I love the beginning of Tessa fake throwing herself.
Yeah, I could have had the link start right at the song, but I'm like, no, people need to see that.
It's entertaining.
So instead of comma space capital letter, we have a comma. Wait, instead of period space capital letter. Oh, yeah.
I never noticed that when he does the thing where he like fake kisses her, you can hear Nick laughing in the background.